Oh. Hi, welcome to the Second Rainbow Coalition Reading Group. We are on Chapter 15 of Ojibwa Warrior, Dennis Banks, and the Rise of the American Indian Movement. I'll begin with the Statement of Unity here. The preface is, the U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of the indigenous nations, breaking every treaty made with them, and confining them to reservations or concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the eagle sunk its claws into other nations, making war on Mexico and grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them outright or making them colonies or neo-colonies. In the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power in the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military interventions and robbing them of their right to self-determination. As Huey P. Newton stated, we have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism. Between the two, capitalism is primary. Racism is a byproduct of capitalism. The working people of the world of every ethnicity or nationality face a common enemy that is destroying life on Earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life. Food, shelter, healthcare, education, freedom from oppression by the state, and peace with other nations. To obtain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969 by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, and the Young Patriots Organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses had developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against the capitalist imperialist system in various ways around particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the First Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a race struggle. He said that it's a class struggle, goddammit. By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule, and subsequently used the entire repressive forces of the state, the police, courts, jails, prisons, and intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the united front that will best serve our class liberation. By upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots Organization, and all other original Rainbow Coalition members, we establish our programmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All power to the people, boots on the ground. The members of the coalition are the New African Black Panther Party, the White Panther Party, the Green Party of New Jersey, the Poor People's Army, La Maison Nationale des Brown Berets, Fury, which is feminist uprising to resist inequality and exploitation, NASO, which is the North Alabama School for Organizers, and the New Era Young Lords. The 6 disciplinary rules are: number 1, members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. Number 2, members will be sober when on Rainbow Coalition business and will not engage in any criminal activity while a member. Number 3, no member will engage in violence except in the extremity of self-defense. Number 4, members will not gossip nor be divisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. Number 5, members will not act as informers nor work against the purpose of the Second Rainbow Coalition. Number 6, nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless directly authorized to do so. Also, I'm not sure why this part jumped down a different section, but the other members of the coalition are the Guardian Rebellion and the American Indian Movement Northeast Woodland Chapter. And that concludes the statement of unity there. Comrade Gabby, can you go ahead and screen share the book, please?
Of course, Comrade Zen. I will gladly start streaming it right now. Sorry about that.
Please and thank you.
All right, can y'all see this?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so I will begin reading chapter 15 now. Chapter 15, A Nation Reborn. We are going to go stance for the people buried here in that ditch. There won't be no coffee break. There won't be no coffee break. It was now a whole new ball game. All previous negotiations were meaningless. The Oglalas became what they had been before the white man took their sovereignty away, an independent nation. The Oglalas demanded the same recognition the United States accorded countries such as France and Italy, and they asked the same from the United Nations. In this request, the Oglalas face the greatest confrontation yet. If we ultimately succeed, then other Indian nations would also become independent. The whole system under which the United States had ruled as a system so carefully built over 200 years would simply collapse. Official acknowledgement of the Treaty of 1868 would mean not only that our sacred Black Hills, but all of the Dakotas, much of Montana, Wyoming, and Minnesota, with all of their natural treasures, coal, oil, uranium, gold, and silver, would revert to us. White America would never give that up. It would fight for the land tooth and nail. The odds against us were astronomical. I had no illusions. Still, I would fight for Indian sovereignty no matter the cost, if only to establish the principle for future generations. At Wounded Knee, we formed a new warrior society with brothers and sisters from many tribes. A warrior is not the same as a white soldier who gets paid, gets a pension, and who kills because he is ordered to. To us, a warrior is not about killing. A warrior should be the first to go hungry and the last to eat. He or she should be the first to give away one's own moccasins, and the last to get new ones. That is what being a warrior is all about. When the chiefs, holy men, and elders took counsel at the peace teepee, we all agreed that AIM people should be excluded from the meeting. We felt that we felt that the Oglala people should make all decisions regarding their future without outside influence. Yep, self-determination. The traditional leaders emerged from an all-day council inside the teepee and told the crowd that they had chosen to declare their nation's sovereignty. They had voted to send delegates to the United Nations and to inform the White House in Washington, D.C., that the Oglalas were going to be independent from now on, and was eager to help them. We assisted them in setting up a provisional government, and then everyone present began strengthening our positions at Wounded Knee. We planned to ready to repel any invaders. We made the Pine Ridge Reservation, onto which the Oglalas had been driven by force, a land base. We had this land. We had a government. We had the support of Indian people on the Pine Ridge Reservation. We even had the support of the majority of white America. In the Harris poll, 2/3 of the Americans informed of events at Wounded Knee sided with us. What was at stake was not merely the Wounded Knee site. What was at stake was not merely the lives of a few hundred people, but a way of life and our right to live it. To make it perfectly clear that the United States was now a foreign country, and that the Oglala Nation now had borders like other nations, borders that included Wounded Knee. Russell Means made a statement. If any foreign official representing a foreign power, specifically the United States, comes in here without permission, they will be treated as an act of war and dealt with accordingly. He added that spies would be shot by a firing squad. Hell yeah. The last bit was a typical piece of Russell rhetoric. Oddly enough, the guys sent by the government to spy on us were four postal inspectors guided by 2 vigilante ranchers. Of course, it wasn't about inspecting the mail. Postal inspectors are federal agents with the same powers as the FBI. They can make arrests. The four postal inspectors carried guns and wore badges when they came to our border. Our secretary stopped them at the checkpoints, disarmed them, and arrested them. They were made to stand in a row with their hands on their heads, shivering. They were photographed, and their pictures appeared in local newspapers, which must have been embarrassing for them. Once caught, the postal inspectors immediately identified themselves as federal agents and said, "We are armed. We have handcuffs," trying to forestall our security from discovering their identity and roughing them up. They said they had come to, quote unquote, check out mail and tampering. We thought this was more than a little strange. 4 federal agents concerned with mail and fraud during a major confrontation with daily firefights. The postal inspectors were brought into the museum, which served as our security headquarters. They were told to sit down and wait. Their guns, handcuffs, and badges were piled on a table. One of the inspectors was so scared that he pissed his fucking pants. Jesus Christ. The urine ran down his leg, forming a puddle on the floor. When Leonard Crow Dog came in, one of our security guards asked him, "What do we do with these characters?" Leonard told him that it was early in the morning, that it was sorry, I lost where I was.
It was
That
cold.
It was cold. Yeah, that it was cold, and that they probably needed some coffee. They were provided with coffee and scrambled eggs, although our food supplies were low. For the better part of an hour, Crow Dog explained to them that what the situation was at Pine Ridge and why we occupied Wounded Knee. Then he had the agents politely escorted out of the perimeter. Later, after our stand at Wounded Knee was over, Leonard Crow Dog, Stan Holder, and Carter Camp were tried and convicted on charges of armed robbery and interfering with federal officers in the performance of their duties. Sure. performance of their duties. Sorry, I got lost again. Right, here we go. They faced the armed robbery charges. They faced the armed robbery charge because they had come into the room while the guns were lying on the table. They had not been present when the guns and cuffs were taken away from the quote-unquote postal inspectors, but their presence in the same room made them guilty in the eyes of the law. The courts did not go after the security guys who actually disarmed the inspectors because they were only interested in nailing the leadership. The second charge was brought against them because they had interfered with the agent's attempt to spy on us. Even before we dealt with the US spies, we were further refining the nature of our newfound tribal sovereignty. The newly liberated country was offering citizenship to whomever happened to be within its parameter. Passports were issued and visas given out to the press and to quote-unquote foreigners. I said, this is no longer a perimeter, it is a border. The newly established provisional government formed committees on housing, defense, immigration, internal security, public health, and information. Though he was not officially named as such, Vernon Bellecourt, who was always on the outside doing what he could from a distance, acted as a foreign minister. The vacant houses of missionaries and business owners who had left on March 6 were taken over for us as kitchens, information centers, sleeping quarters, and so on. The central part of the training post became an auditorium where people are gathered every day to hear the latest news. They listened to speeches by the leadership and elders, voiced complaints about various things we needed to deal with, and sang and prayed together. We had realized that we would have to stay in Wounded Knee for a long time and that security would become all important. We used a mechanical backhoe to dig deeper bunkers. We put stoves into our bunkers, and we installed sleeping lofts or bunk beds. Our new nation created an army that was unlike the U.S. Army as possible. It had no generals or colonels. It was an army. It was an army of equals. It was made of men and women who respected life and hated killing, because the loss of life, whether white, red, yellow, or black, is still a loss of life and a victory for death. We had no uniforms, unless you call ribbon shirts uniforms. We had no officers barking orders, or our warriors, we had no officers barking orders, but our warriors sang a lot. We had no discipline except self-discipline. Ours was a wonderfully strange army. At the knee, we had what we called roving patrols. We used cars borrowed from local missionaries. We used about 5 cars fueled with gas from the trading post pumps to patrol the hills and keep the marshals and APCs at bay. The first federal roadblocks had been set up about 1.5 miles from our lines, and we were able to keep them at that distance. We had our patrols going 24 hours a day. The roving patrol squad was made up of men from the Northwest, Montana, Washington State, and Northern Carolina. These men were some of our strongest warriors. One night we heard that the feds were sniping near the last stand bunker on the road to Manderson. They were shooting at some of our people trying to come in. We opened fire on the marshals, not to hit them, but to scare them off. It worked. All our men returned safely, and the marshals' fire slackened off on most sanctions. During that third week, it was snowing hard. We rarely initiated firefights, partially because we had so little ammo. There were hardly any firefights during blizzards, but one day the firing got so intense that slugs coming through the walls of the Sacred Heart Church carried away the chin of the statue of Jesus Christ, blew a hole in the chest of Joseph, and shot off the hand of the Virgin Mary. Damn. yet they're good Christians, right? On March 17th, the Fed started a firefight that lasted 3 hours. One of our medics, a Chicano named Rocky Madrid, a really first class guy, was wounded. He and Owen Luck, a former helicopter medic in Vietnam, ran with their first aid kits to where our young warriors were under heavy fire. They were clearly identifiable as medics. They wore helmets and armbands marked with big red crosses and carried a white flag, but the marshals opened fire on them with machine guns. That night, the night was illuminated by so many flares that you could have read a newspaper. The feds must have been aware that they were shooting at medics. For some time, the two men were enveloped by tracer bullets buzzing like a cloud of angry bees. Witnesses thought they would literally be blown to bits. Rocky was hit in the stomach by a bullet that had ricocheted, but he managed to drag himself to the clinic. Crow Dog applied his numbing medicine, then used a small pocket knife to dig out the slug, which was stuck in the muscle. He fanned Rocky off with the burning sage using his eagle wing. Rocky said he didn't feel the pain. He was up and going 3 days later. Owens was not hit. The standoff continued. People often forget that AIM is not so much a political organization as it is a spiritual one. Carter Camp and Sid Mills set up a routine in the bunker so the men could purify themselves by taking sweat baths every evening. Sweat lodge fires were going all the time in the early weeks of Wounded Knee. It didn't matter what race you were. If you were at the knee, you went through the traditional sweat baths and purification ceremonies. Our ancient Indian religion had found a renewal at Wounded Knee. That's fucking beautiful. It brought us together once again into the sacred hoop of our ancient beliefs. We're becoming what we once had been. It was in the environment at Wounded Knee that our chief medicine man, Leonard Crow Dog, decided to bring the ghost dance back, because it was here that in 1890, Chief Bigfoot's ghost dancers had been massacred by U.S. soldiers. After the massacre, the ghost dance was outlawed, as well as all other traditional Indian ceremonies. Crow Dog told the people, "We're going to ghost dance. There are 40 of us who want to do it right here on the brown, dried up winter grass and patches of snow. We're ghost dancing here where our people were massacred. We'll dance for 4 days. You'll be tired, but there is no saying, 'I'm tired, I've got to rest.' There's no rest in the ghost dance. No coffee, no lunch break, no cigarettes. There won't be, I'm a Sioux. I'm a Chippewa. I'm a Mohawk. We'll be dancing as one tribe, and whether it's snowing or freezing, we'll dance. And maybe somebody among us will get a vision or be in the trance and fall down. Well, you must not be scared of this. We'll not be calling for a medic. The spirit will be the doctor. Just keep going. Don't stop for anything. Hold hands. I'll teach you a song, the voices of the spirits. The drama will be the heartbeat of Mother Earth. The clouds are the dreams, visions of the mind. We will be praying to elevate ourselves from this world to the other world." The dancers met in a hollow away from the eyes of the feds an hour before dawn the next morning. It was the same gully where Bigfoot's people had been massacred. The dancers moved slowly in a circle in the light flurry of snowflakes. In the center of the dance, Crow Dog had planted an evergreen tree, a tree of life. Some of the dancers fell down in a trance. Some had visions. 4 full days, the ghost dancers danced. Some of those dancing and praying were descendants of the people from Bigfoot's band. And we had a sign. A long eagle circled overhead. Medicine Man Wallace Black Elk told the people, "The tree of life withered and seemed to die on the frozen field with the slaughtered bodies of our women and children. But the roots of the tree are still alive. They are not dead. The sacred hoop of the people has been made whole again." During the first days of the occupation, we did not have a food problem. We lived off of what we found on the trading posts. All kinds of frozen and canned foods and canned goods were stocked for tourists in the little grocery store. We had, on the average, about 300 supporters living inside the perimeter, besides the local Indian residents who did not take part in the occupation but lived inside the perimeter. It had to be fed. It had to be fed all the same. Our supplies did not last long. Soon we got down to skimpy meals a day, mostly rice and pinto beans. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Pinto beans.
Pinto beans.
Pinto beans.
Yeah.
At other times, the only thing we had to eat was oatmeal. Well, I don't like oatmeal.
Pinto beans are red. You know what pinto beans are? Red beans.
I don't know what they are. Red beans? Ooh, yeah. That sounds pretty good. The cooking was originally done in several different areas, but later it was centralized for efficiency. It was necessary to keep all food together so the cooks knew at all times what was available. The food was dispensed in rations according to the number of people in each area. The hospital, however, had priority due to the needs of the sick, the aged, the very young, and the wounded. They came first, and of course the warriors on the firing line got their meals before the general population because they were putting their lives on the line to protect us. Acquiring food became a problem. There was plenty of food donated to us by well-wishers, but the feds would not allow it through. It was piling up in places like Crow Dog's Paradise, and it was up to us to smuggle it in. The government was determined to starve us into submission. Chief U.S. Marshal Wayne Colburn announced on March 12th that no food for the Indians would be allowed to pass federal roadblocks, saying, "We will establish a tighter perimeter and starve out the occupiers." Fucking disgusting. He added, I'm sure as hell planning to change their lifestyle. If that means starving, if it means being cold or not being able to read the evening paper or watch television or make phone calls and having no soap to wash themselves or their clothes, well, good. They have only themselves to blame. Fucking white supremacist bastard. When the government turned our lights off, we went back to oil lamps and candles. When they turned off the water, we went through the gullies to get creek water. When the feds turned the heat off in the middle of the Dakota winter, we made a stove out of oil cans and made some heat that way. It was my job to organize the nightly backpack caravans that traveled through the ravines and arroyos that arroyos that crisscrossed the area, our underground railroad. The marshals and the FBI knew that supplies were reaching us, but didn't know by what route. They did interfere with a few backpackers that they could find, but they never could stop them completely. Our underground railroads were usually guided by someone like Pedro Bissonet, or Oscar Bear Runner, who knew all the areas well and could make their way to us in dark. They came by starlight or navigated by the light of a distant landmark. Bringing in food meant a long walk in the night, usually 10 to 15 miles through the country, teeming with government snipers using infrared night scopes and trained attack dogs. The land was often swept by machine gun fire and streams of tracer bullets, which Crow Dog said looked like swarms of lightning bugs. The dogs, at least, we knew how to handle. I think it was Stan Holder and Owen Luck who invented the urine and paper anti-dog defense. Damn. I'm going to try that out. A group of men would go along urinating on the ground, laying a trail for the dogs to follow. The trail always ended in a handful of hot chili pepper. Once their noses connected with the paper, the dogs were useless for hours. God damn, that's a good guerrilla tactic. Damn. Our backpacks usually weighted weighed about 40 to 50 pounds loaded. Backpacking was exhausting and dangerous. You could get into a crossfire even if agents did not know you were there. If flares illuminated the area, you had to lie down on your belly, often in some ice-covered puddle, and try to make yourself as flat as a flounder. When passing close to the feds, backpackers often walked for a considerable time in their stocking feet to avoid making noise. The backpackers who were arrested for their efforts were charged with crossing state lines with the intent to incite or participate in a riot. Fucking bullshit. By the beginning of April, the feds had tightened the ring around us so close that hardly a mouse could get through. They finally discovered a particularly well hidden section of the trail and posted several APCs with mounted machine guns along the path. By March 30th, we were down to 2 meals a day. A week later, it was 1 meal a day. And the week after that, we had to go by with 1 meal every other day with a bowl of thin soup in between. On the day of occupation ended, the only food left was a 40-pound bag of dry pinto beans. The first signs of malnutrition had appeared among the children. They were very thin and had little immunity to infection. A number of people suffered from respiratory illnesses. The elderly and small children were also suffering from intestinal bugs and diarrhea. There was no toilet paper. Most of us used the great outdoors, but the toilet in the clinic was backing up. Medical supplies were stopped in the roadblocks. Our doctors warned us of the possibility of serious disease. Everyone was coughing. Warriors did bunker duty while running a fever. Ken Frizzle, the chief government representative at the time, would only let powdered milk and baby food pass into Wounded Knee. He declared, "To my knowledge, the U.S. government has never given food to the enemy to sustain them." Fucking piece of shit. We weren't ready to give up yet, so rather than starve, we tried castle wrestling. A rancher named Coates had a big spread nearby where he ran his cattle. We liberated some of these animals, which according to an old tradition we called slow elk. I joked around saying that many of these cows were straying into our perimeter, which made them illegal aliens or even agents disguised as cows. Some of our young warriors who hunted the slow elk were from the city. They didn't quite know how to go about it. Once they led in a cow that none of them knew how to kill or butcher. A white reporter shot and skinned it for them. Another time, they came in with an ancient stringy bull whose meat was likely to break our teeth. I put up a poster showing the rear end of a bull with big balls and a cow with an udder. I jokingly wrote underneath, "This is bull. This is a cow." It was the backpackers who kept us alive. Part of my job was keeping morale up. When people are hungry and freezing, they need a moral booster. That was me. There was a mammograph machine in the trading post, and we had a lot of paper. As much as 2,000 sheets. So I started a daily newsletter to all the people at the knee. The news service became really important after the telephone line was cut. I would get up before dawn and type out the day's message. Every day the backpackers came in with tidbits of information. They also brought us newspapers. Sharing the news connected all of us with one another. I told the people about our supporters all across the country. It was my job to boost their spirits. Every night I handed out news bulletins and distributed mail that had been smuggled in by our runners. Many times I played psychiatrist to people with troubled minds. I also arranged for people on the inside to get word of their families and friends on the outside via our underground railroad. Before the phone lines were cut, I would read into the people messages we received from hundreds of well wishers, letters, telegrams, and phone calls came from every part of the world. One, we got a call from a group of skins in Vietnam telling us they wished they were with us at the meet, that the real war was happening in America, not in Southeast Asia. During our one meeting, I read aloud no less than 70 telegrams from supporters. That's beautiful. These telegrams were prayers for our survival and for victory in our struggles. Roos also had a job to do in getting word out to the press, telling the world that the Oglalas themselves occupied Wounded Knee, not some white commies and hippies, as Dick Wilson had told the press. Fucking hell. On April 5th, after days of wrangling, a solemn agreement was signed between us and Kent Frizzle, which seemed to finally end the siege. In the name of government, Frizzle accepted 6 of the 10 demands representing the conditions under which we would disarm. Under this agreement, we would get congressional hearings on the continuing validity of the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie, and a meeting at the White House. The agreement was signed in front of the media. On the same day, our delegation of Leonard Crowdog, Russell Means, Tom Bad Cobb, and Roman Rubidoux left for Washington, D.C. to finalize the agreement. We had won a further concession. The phone lines were open once again so that those of us staying at Wounded Knee could communicate with the delegation and discuss their progress. In the meantime, I experienced some of my happiest days inside our encircled little village. It was a time when Kamuk and I could begin to breathe again. She had shared so much with me, often going out to the firing line with the first aid crew, taking food to the warriors and being pinned down by fire during intense exchange. I felt relief that she was safe. On April 11th, 80-year-old Mary Ellen Moore gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I remember thanking the Creator for giving us a new life. To me, the event was the symbolic rebirth of something good and beautiful that had died in the snow of 1890. The day before, we had heard a recurrence of ghostly crying from the grave of the 1890 massacre. Even some of the marshals heard it from their sandbags. We were told later that some of the feds couldn't stand the sounds and broke down. I felt, as many others did, that our ancestors' spirits were with us, moving about at the time of this baby's arrival. That's beautiful. The birth took place inside a trailer during a firefight. Josette Wawasuk.
I don't know. Souk. You say souk.
Wawasuk acted as the chief midwife. She was 72 years old, and we called her Grandma Aim. She had delivered 13 babies before this one, so she knew what she was doing. Josette was assisted by Annie Mae Pictou, Vernona Kills Wright, and Ellen Moves Camp. It was not an easy birth. Mary was in labor a long time. The little newborn was called Pedro, in honor of Pedro Bisonet, who was a friend of Mary's. The naming of a baby always has a special significance, but even more so this time. Pedro was later murdered by BIA police. Through Mary and her son, his memory and name live on. That's saddening. We informed Red Arrow, the Fed's communications center, of Mary's birthday and the possibility that she might need to be moved out of the perimeter. The Feds had seen a lot of our people braving the exposure to danger, miling around the trailer, drumming and singing in spite of the bullets. They wondered what could be going on over there. Excuse me. Just as soon as little Pedro gave his first cry, I went into the trailer with a few others to hug Mary, and I wept openly. She was not even done with the birth yet, as the afterbirth had yet to be taken care of. The people neither minded that nor did they pay attention to the marshal's bullets whizzing by. Everybody was just eager to see the baby, hug Mary, and thank her and thank her for the great things she had done for us. The baby's natural father was not at the knee and was never in partnership with Mary after that, but she had a circle of family here all around her. After a while, little Pedro was dressed. Josette held him up briefly through the trailer window for all the people to see. A sheer and brave heart cry rose up when the crowd saw him. By then, the prairie around us was on fire. The feds were still burning off all the underbrush to deprive our backpackers of cover. Vernona told me they're making a smoke signal to announce the birth of our little Wounded Knee warrior. That night there was a ceremony among the people. The AIM song was sung for little Pedro, and I remember talking to the Great Spirit in the sweat lodge, giving thanks for this new life. The next day, another event occurred that gladdened me. There took place a wedding between oh boy, between Nogeshiki no, wait no no Nogishik Akwash and Ojibwa and Anna May Picto, a young Micmac woman from Nova Scotia. Around the second week in March, they had come in with a group of 4 or 5 other people from the east. Nogishik was a thin, rather elegant-looking man who wore a stylish, flat-brimmed hat. Annie Mae was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but as I was glad to find out, she had the heart of a lion. Usually, Stan Holder would bring newcomers over to us leaders late in the afternoon. I remember that March day when he brought we brought the couple and their companions to the trading post so we could talk to them. I spoke to both of them and asked Nogishik and Annie Mae what they wanted to do. I told them, you can be on the firing line, you can help with the cooking, you can go out and hunt, you can bring food in for the warriors, you can be on security, and there are other duties to perform. They looked at each other, and Annie Mae said, we'll both take the firing line. And I said, all right. I assigned them back to Stan, who took them to the crow's nest bunker. When I saw Nogishik and Annie Mae about 2 or 3 days later, they were digging in. They had found a place to dig themselves a big foxhole. I thought to myself, these two are going to stay here for the duration. I saw Annie Mae cooking, digging latrines, and helping out at the first aid station, but mostly she and Nogishik stayed close to their foxhole on the firing line. One night, One night in early April, Nogishi came up to me and said that he and Annie Mae wanted to get married at the knee. This idea thrilled me. I had told him, maybe you should see Wallace Black Elk and together with your request, give him an offering of tobacco. Normally, Crow Dog would have performed the marriage, but he was still in Washington, D.C. with our delegation. Though we had sent a delegation to Washington D.C. to negotiate peace, there was still firefights every night. I was usually absorbed by the raging battle, but I would sometimes get a glimpse of Nogishik and Annie Mae. She sometimes had a handgun strapped to her waist, but more often carried a rifle. She always seemed busy. I never saw her idle. She was one person who never was a burden. And in fact, she lightened the burdens of everyone else. That's how I remember her inside Wounded Knee. Wallace had told me about their wedding plans and wanted to know what he should do. There was still the possibility that Crow Dog might come back in a time to perform the ceremony. We were waiting for word from Roos. He, Crow Dog, and the other delegates were supposed to negotiate with the White House people. That then they were to call us to say whether the administration, which we hoped would include, including the president, would meet with us to end the occupation. But the call never came. Finally, Roos called me from his room in the Washington, D.C. hotel where he was staying. He and the White House people still had him on hold, that at any moment a meeting might take place, and that they had told him to stand by. On April 8th, Roos was reported to say, "We are at an impasse. We we've abided We've abided by the agreements and we're still waiting. There are over 200 men, women, and children whose lives are on the lines at Wounded Knee, and we're sitting here in this goddamn bourgeois hotel that we can't afford, getting fucked over by the White House." It didn't seem that either Roos or Crow Dog would be attending the wedding. Nogishik and Annie Mae were growing impatient and wanted to be married with the pipe in the big hall of the trading post where we had set up command. Wallace asked me, "When should we do it then?" I said, "Well, as soon as possible, within a week." He said, "Well, set a date." "All right, we'll have it on April 12th. I said this on impulse and then remembered that date was my birthday. That was just fine with me. It would be a memorable day. Four male elders gathered on the same evening that Mary had given birth and advised Nogishik on the meaning and duties of an Indian marriage. Four women elders did the same with Annie Mae. Afterwards, the four men and four women made flesh offerings for the couple. Tiny squares of skin were cut from their forearms as a sacrifice to ensure a good life for those about to be wed. Then we held a sweat lodge ceremony. I felt good. Here we had a birth, and right after it, a wedding was about to take place. I took that as a sign of life continuing for us. I felt there would always be Indians, that our history was not about to end, and I thought tomorrow there would be a joining of two people together as man and wife. Children are being born. This is no longer an occupational force. There's a ceremony. There's a community coming alive here at Wounded Knee. So we prepared for the next day. On the morning of April 12th, we began the ceremony. Nogishik treated us to a small giveaway, very small under the circumstances, but the spirit was generous. We were still hoping Crow Dog would arrive, but we proceeded with the wedding ritual. Wallace Black Elk performed the ritual, and it was beautiful. We put the blanket over their shoulders, two radiant people sheltered by one blanket, four hands joined in holding the pipe. I introduced Nogishik and Annie Mae to the people. Most of them already knew the groom and bride, but every day new people came to the knee. The big room was packed with about 300 people, a joyful gathering after so many weeks of stress. I took my place at the drum, and we began singing songs the way Wallace instructed us. Of course, we sang the AIM song, all 5 verses of it. Martina White Bear, a young Winnebago woman. I did not pronounce that right.
Yeah, Winnebago.
Yeah, Winnebago. Did the cedering, did the cedering and fanning off. She said to me, that's the way I want to be married someday. Wallace spoke, "My brothers and sisters, this is a great happening. The first marriage ever performed at Wounded Knee under the independent Oglala Nation. And I want to thank you. You who have come to aid the Oglala Sioux in the time of trouble and uncertainty, and now you are part of our family. We are really proud of you, and may the joy of the Great Spirit be your strength. This is my prayer." We smoked the pipe. First the newlyweds, then the 4 men and 4 women elders who had come to the part of the ceremony, then the inner circle, and then the drum group. We all shook hands. I went up to Nogishik to shake his hand. I looked down on Annie Mae, and she gave me the shining, big, beautiful smile. I said to her, "Today is a good day." She nodded yes. I said, "By the way, Annie Mae, April 12th is my birthday, so your wedding was a birthday gift to me." She smiled again and said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The two of them were very proud as they returned to stand on the firing line together. It was a fine example for the other warriors to see these two together under fire in the face of such odds, standing up to the greatest military force on earth. That to me was showing America the way we were going to go on. We were not just about foxhole duties and finding the feds. We were continuing with our lives. We knew the government could could and would put us in jail and could even kill us. But nothing could stop our movement. We had a destiny and we were going to survive. And that is the end of the chapter. Wow, what a beautiful and empowering chapter. That was beautiful.
Yes, it was.
I almost cried a little bit. Also, by the way, I want to apologize in case any of y'all heard anything in the background. My mother was trying to tell me something. So if there wasn't any interference in the background, I apologize.
That's really beautiful that amidst basically, having war with the U.S. government, they were still like, fuck that, we're doing our community things here too and having a wedding.
Yeah, exactly. That's beautiful, That's just fucking beautiful. Like, that's revolutionary right there, Not just militancy, which is a major part of revolution, but showing that community, that love to one another and providing for each other. That's revolutionary, and that right there was just beautiful. It's really it really gives me hope. Does anyone have anything to say about this chapter reading?
Well, I got something to say about it. Yeah, in spite of the fact that they were under the gun, so there was a wedding that jumped off. I don't think that. Well, my personal feeling is, I don't think that it should have been focused on the wedding, because, I mean, they're under the gun, man. They're getting ready to get killed. And I mean, it's okay. I mean, they know each other as comrades or brothers and sisters. Now a wedding, in addition, I don't know. I don't think I would have been willing to get married under those circumstances.
That's very understandable, Conrad. That's very understandable. Hey, that's perfectly understandable, And like, when we do our revolution, we're under the gunfire, Obviously, we're not gonna get married, and we're not gonna do all of that. But I think still doing things that that make us happy. It boosts morale.
Yeah, I understand that. It boosts. I mean, love is love, man.
Exactly.
But this love, regardless whether you get married or not, it's still love. But you have to focus. But you have to focus in on the fact, man, that you have the enemy on your case, man, and they were. I mean, could you imagine the same situation like in Cuba? You know what they're doing in Cuba right now? They're stopping everything from going in. So the reason why socialism has not formulated itself completely in Cuba is because of the United States. The United States has not allowed Cuba to develop the way they want to develop. Okay, it's a socialist government, but I mean, come on, man. It could have been better. And a lot of people are leaving Cuba not because it's not because Cuba. I got some Cubans that came over to my house the other day, and they were talking that bullshit to me and telling me, like Castro, man, he's a bad. I said, no, listen, if he come to my house, leave Castro and leave Cuba out of the question, because I don't want to offend them. I really don't want to offend them, even though I know who they are, because in the final analysis, if they left Cuba, they're my enemies. That's how I see it. Cuba's my enemies. Because that's what happened with the need, man. They were under that pressure, man, and the government was squeezing. Hopefully, man, that they'll give in. The government does that all the time, man. You know.
Yep. One thing that I do want to point out in this book, I was a little bit confused as to why they want to be a part of, as to why they want to be a part of the United Nations. Of course, I can understand, but like I don't see how that would have helped because, like, for instance, Cuba is a part of the United Nations, if I remember correctly, and they're still under U.S. embargo. So like regardless if they would have been accepted into the UN or not, the U.S. would have still exploited them, oppressed them, and subjugated them to maximize as much profit as possible and taking their resources and surplus value for their own benefit. So I don't see how joining the UN would have helped in that way.
Well, I don't know, because I know Che Guevara went to the UN. Remember he went to the UN?
Yeah, he went to the UN.
He went to the UN, and what a lot of people don't, I mean, Castro, man, when he first took over, and I shouldn't say Castro, I should say the people, but when Castro took over, he attempted to negotiate with the United States so that the United States could aid him. But the United States would aid him under the condition that they control the means of production in Cuba. And Castro wasn't going to allow that. So Castro said, hell with this, man. And that's when he went to Russia. He turned to Russia for help, and as a result of that, a lot of, see, when we talk about revolutionaries, we sometimes, I don't know, we get caught up in the definition, because there was a lot of revolutionaries that fought with Castro. Mm-hmm. And yet when Castro turned to Russia, those so-called revolutionaries, they scattered. And where'd they go? They left Cuba. And they came to they left Cuba, man, and came to the United States. And currently, right now, part of Florida is owned by Cubans. Isn't that kicking ass? Miami is owned by Cubans, man. Anyway.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry, Conrad. I always love hearing you. Speak about this, and I also get passionate about Cuba as well. But Andy has something to say. What do you have to say, Comrade Andy? You're muted.
Okay. Well, I think that one of the things about this chapter is really, really powerful. But like I have a very close friend who was there, and he's told me a little bit about it. And
was that Wounded Knee?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was from Ohio, and he was a young man going to college at Kent, and he decided to go and hooked up there, and it really drew a lot of people. And as I pointed out, the American people basically supported this resistance. This was looked upon as being a just thing, as was the recent pipeline protests. The vast majority of American people supported the demands of the indigenous people who were, organized and very, very extremely well disciplined. Again, in many respects, like the 1970s, they were also tremendously disciplined. And they did not invite violence. But they got it, right? This is the thing. The U.S. government does not respect any other authority than its own. So anybody who violates property rights is going to get it. That's the thing. Property rights are the most sacrosanct rights of all. You can talk about your human rights, you talk about your right to free speech, blah, blah, blah. But in this country, property rights trumps everything, to use a bad name. But that's the, I think part of the lesson here is that actually, in order to go to a humane system, we have to go to communism, which means we have to violate property rights. When I was asking my brother-in-law one time, and I didn't consider him to be real bright, I might have mentioned this before, but I said, you know why the Indians, or the indigenous people, weren't able to stay here, and we lived in a place where there had been many. And he said, yeah, because of private property. And I said, well, shit, you're right. That's the reason. There's that they could not effectively enslave the indigenous people. That was not going to work. So they set up all these phony treaties, that they never intended to honor, in order to do what? Grab and privatize their property,
their land, their resources, etc.
Yeah. Now that we've moved into a final phase of this system, there is going to be fewer and fewer jobs. They're estimating now 80-90% of the jobs now can effectively be done away with technology. We have no choice, but communism is no longer simply an ideological choice that you say, I'm a communist, I'm a this, I'm a that. Communism is the only practical solution to the world's problems. We have to have it, or the only people that will survive will be this handful of oligarchs and bureaucrats. Last weekend, we went out to the country where my kids stay, and my son said, you got to see this coming over tomorrow night. We went out in the field, and sure enough, here comes Elon Musk's Starlink. It's like
you saw Elon Musk?
Yeah, Musk put up Starlink quite a while ago, and it's like a trail of satellites that you can see from the Earth. It looks like alien. Well, that's what it looks real pretty, but what it's for is to be used by the military to precisely control missiles and launches, and that's what's being used for. He gave it away to Ukraine. It could be used to give the whole world free internet, or for instance, just one of the many things it could do. It could be used for the benefit of the world, but it's controlled by Musk, who is a contractor to the U.S. military. So we are at more than a crossroads. I mean, we all know how serious this is in terms of the world's physical health. Even the orcas apparently understand, and we have to go to a communist system, collectively owned, and restore the planet. That's the only way it can go forward. So I think that this is a good example of how they weren't united around a particular scientific ideology here.
Yeah.
Even though they may have been familiar with it, but they were united around the practical matter of living and surviving and thriving and seeing a future for their children. And that's in many ways where the rest of us have caught up to it. The indigenous population, they were abandoned, and now we're all being abandoned. It took us, another maybe 50 years to realize it, but here we are.
I'm totally in agreement with Brother Andy. We have no other choice.
Indeed.
But we have no other choice. We have to go towards communism. We have no other choice. And
You
of
know,
course,
sorry.
the U.S. government is not going to tolerate that. The
Nope.
U.S. government will go to any extent, to any limits, to maintain their power. So we have to go to any limits to obtain it.
100% agreed, Karache, you know. And yeah, I agree on your analysis on AIM, Comrade Andy. They definitely, don't get me wrong, they were definitely familiar with certain understandings, you know, of revolution, you know, but I don't think they were, as you said, I don't think they were particularly. I don't think they particularly established an ideological and political line based on a dialectical scientific analysis, you know, of the materialistic conditions and, you know, and of class struggle, which I think, which AIM being a part of the Second Rainbow Coalition, I think they now are, you know, I think now they're I think now they have that more unified and, you know, scientific, ideological, and political line where they before didn't. But 100%, you know, because right now, if we do not transition over to communism, we are all going to fucking die. Like, we are all going to die. The planet and life on Earth is being killed off and made into hell, all for the sake that these bourgeois billionaires can just increase their profits by that little, by 0.01%, you know? And, you know, I've said before, and I'll say it again, you know, you can't have an island of communism and then have a sea of imperialism out there, you know? In order to transition, in order for class struggle, in order for the socialist transitionary phase to end, we have to eradicate all the contradictions of capitalism all over the earth, you know? We have to eradicate all of them, and that's going to take time, you know? Because each region, each country, each nation has its own materialistic conditions, their own materialistic needs, and how they apply the principles of Marxism and dialectical materialism is going to be different for each one, you know? It's not going to be the exact same. How revolution is going to happen in Germany, it's not going to be the same as how revolution is going to happen in France, and so on and so forth, you know? We definitely need to transition from capitalism to communism, but it's going to take time. And in order to fully transition and have self-determination, we have to completely eradicate and topple, and we have to completely eradicate and purge all of the contradictions of capitalism, both the primary and secondary contradictions, so that we have to make it so there is no longer a need for the state. There's no longer a need to keep the state to protect itself, because there are no longer contradictions and antagonisms that will threaten it. Only then will we be able to transition into a post-revolutionary society. Only then will socialist transformation and the socialist transitionary period that Marx talked about will end and communism will begin. So yeah.
As long as you know, this is what I say.
Mm-hmm.
As long as, you know, there is imperialism anywhere in the world, mm-hmm. As long as there's imperialism anywhere in the world, communism cannot be fruitful.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot. It's impossible.
Imperialism needs to be eradicated.
And the thing is that there's many, see, we talk about contradictions, but there's a lot of contradictions amongst us.
Yep.
A whole lot of contradictions.
And we got to deal with that.
You remember what Lenin said, to have a revolutionary party, you got to have a revolutionary theory.
Yep.
You know, without a revolutionary theory, you can't have a revolutionary party, vice versa. Mm-hmm. You know, and so we have to iron out all the contradictions that exist amongst us, because there's a lot. Not all of us think the same way. Exactly. You know, some of us want to take a different route. You know, I hear some brothers and sisters, you know, talk about, man, we want to
Anarchists.
A nation right here in the United States. And I said, what you gonna do? Well, we're gonna ask the state to get the government to give us a nation so we could build.
They're not gonna do that.
I mean, come on, man.
Like you can't have a dictatorship of the proletariat. You can't have your own nation without having a means to defend yourself. Like you need that. You need to have a dictatorship of the proletariat. You need to transform the state, take it and transform it into one that will benefit the people and that will benefit you. One that is directly in the control and that represents the masses. I think it was Karl Marx who said that the state is like a snake with multiple heads, and you have to cut off some of those heads and replace them in order to make the state more compliable and more applicable to dialectics, to Marxism, and to the masses. You know, so you're 100%, Andy. Before we talk about militant revolution, before we talk about militant liberation, we have to first liberate ourselves. We have to liberate our minds. We have to liberate, unlearn, dismantle, and uproot any reactionary bourgeois thought that we have left. We have to combat both imperialism and revisionism. We have to unite the masses through cementing ourselves within their materialistic conditions, providing for them, engaging in mass line and cultural revolution and grassroots movements, and once they see that revolution is possible, once they see that these tactics works, that there is something better, they will follow in the ideological and political line of the party. And you have something to say, Andy?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be grasped here. I think there's some things about the question of what is a nation, and the whole national question that is a particular area of study. All our conclusions more and more are going to have to be accurate, which means more investigation as to where we're headed. Now, right now, this whole country is polarized, but there's no singular party or anything like that that's going to emerge out of this polarization necessarily. What can emerge is, well, a party has to be built, but the thing is that it's going to come from all the different aspects of these different struggles, all these different specific struggles, like you're suggesting. Yeah, in some sense, it's going to be a commonality that's going to bring us together. Like I often wonder, how did the Russian people unite around peace, bread, and land? What's that? What kind of demand is that? But that's exactly what their practical needs were. If they were continuing to get drafted, conscripted into these hopeless wars, they were going to be decimated and destroyed as a people. They didn't have land for the peasantry, so they were always under subjection, and they didn't have enough food to eat. Now we are not in 21st century America in that situation, but we are in a situation where homelessness is becoming rampant, and nobody's doing anything about it. The healthcare system is completely destroyed. So, like what Stalin said was that revolutionary leadership consisted in giving the right answers to the questions that were on people's minds, that people were asking. And people are saying, how in the hell am I going to pay the rent? How in the hell am I going to get these groceries? How in the hell can I get enough gas to get to work on time? How in the hell can I protect my home when I can't get flood insurance in a floodplain? All these kinds of burning questions are being addressed by somebody. In many cases, it's the right wing is giving the answers. They're choosing to attack it on a cultural front and making the most pernicious kind of attacks. And so I think that what we're seeing is a common problem in that the system is imploding and breaking down completely. Yep. And it's doing it rapidly, more rapidly in some places than others. In places like McDowell County, West Virginia, every single person carries what they call it, Narcan pen or something like that. If you for people ODing, because people are dying like flies from fentanyl overdoses all over Appalachia. These are all, for the most part, poor white people. Well, who do they turn to recently? Well, they turn to, Trump, because he promised something. What we have to do is have a vision and a program that's 10,000 times stronger and more appealing than any right-wing appeal. Right-wing nationalism is not just evil and pernicious and full of shit. It won't work. It won't solve their problems. It won't bring back their jobs. It won't reopen the coal mines. It won't do a goddamn thing to get all nationalistic about it. The world isn't run by national boundaries. The world is being run by oligarchs who invest everywhere. So the people have no idea what's coming, and we do as trained and educated revolutionaries. So we have to get out there and answer those questions. They're not asking where Plekhanov stood in 1910 on the on the side of what faction of the Russian populace, or what. None of that stuff matters too much anymore. I mean, it's good to know. It's good to know it if you're a trained revolutionary. And I studied.
Also, Comrade Andy.
Huh?
I was gonna say that it's currently we're currently 1 hour and 40 minutes in. So I just want to say that.
My mouth. I'm sorry, but I think
you were going good. You were doing good, man, brother. You were doing good.
Good. I will make is that answering these burning questions is going to make or break us. If we can't do that, all our specific Marxist Leninist knowledge ain't going to mean squat. And I've studied for 50 years, so I have a little bit of it.
Oh yeah. Well, what you said was beautiful, Andy, and you're 100% right. What people need right now, we need to provide to the people. We need to provide for our communities. We need to make them self-sufficient. We need to provide and establish grassroots to provide self-sufficiency, to show them that there is better. That if the abundance of resources is collectivized and redistributed to our communities, we can survive. That things don't have to be this way. Once we engage in grassroots movements and intercommunalism, and once we establish that, the masses will follow in the ideological and political line of the party. They will start seeing and analyzing things through a dialectical and revolutionary way of analyzing the internal contradictions of our society and saying, okay, this is what I can do to better my community, because the way you radicalize people is not by giving them a lecture. It's not by sending them quotes by Marx and Lenin and Stalin and so on and so forth. No, you meet them at the level that they're at, and you build off of that until they're as knowledgeable or even more knowledgeable than you. That's the whole point of education. That's the whole point of participation, observation, and education. You know, that's the whole point of being revolutionary. I don't want to go too off now because, again, we're kind of running a little bit, but yeah, everything that y'all said was beautiful, and I hope that everyone here has a beautiful day. I'm going to stop recording right now. Stop recording.